It's scary. You'll receive 7 million before you wake up. Neville Goddard taught that the money you have been chasing through your waking hours is already resting quietly in the imagination you fall asleep inside every single night. There is a verse that has stayed with me since the day I first understood what Neville Goddard meant by the word Lord. It comes from the Psalms, and it reads, "When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Then was our mouth filled with laughter, and our tongue with singing." This is Psalm 126, and Neville Goddard would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The Lord is not a distant ruler turning the fortunes of some ancient city thousands of years gone. The Lord is your own I am, the very awareness that you are reading these words right now. And Zion is your desired state, the 7 million, the freedom, the ease you have been longing to enter, held captive behind the locked door of your present circumstance. When your own imagination turns toward that captive state and holds it, quietly, as already free, you become like them that dream. You slip into the very state akin to sleep, where the fact is finished long before your eyes ever open to prove it. And you wake, not hoping, not checking your phone with a knot in your stomach, but laughing, your mouth filled with the laughter of a thing already accomplished. And here is the part that must be said gently. If you have been assuming that this money must be wrestled from the world through anxious daylight struggle, that very assumption of struggle is the locked door itself. The world has taught you to labor for what imagination was always meant to simply assume. Say it with me. I am asleep tonight in the assumption of my wish fulfilled. I wake to find the 7 million already done. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am asleep tonight in the assumption of my wish fulfilled. I wake to find the 7 million already done. Imagination creates my reality. If something in you just went quiet and settled when you said that, type the words "it's done" in the comments below right now. Let it be your seal upon this assumption. And if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the moment you wake, simply subscribe, so this quiet work can continue in you daily. The first key is knowing that your imagination is not idle daydreaming. It is the one true creative power operating in you. Neville Goddard taught that imagination is God, the very Jehovah of Scripture, functioning as your own wonderful human imagination. And if that is so, then the pictures you quietly entertain are not a pastime. They are the actual workshop where your 7 million is being fashioned this very hour, long before any bank statement carries a trace of it. Most of us were raised to believe money is a hard external fact, wrestled from a hard external world through years of anxious labor. So we treat imagination like a toy, harmless, for children and artists, never for serious adults building a life. And this is exactly backward. It is not fantasy. It is the fact behind every fact you will ever touch. Consider the man who imagines himself passed over before the meeting even begins, who rehearses the rejection in the shower, who calls this being realistic. Neville Goddard would say he is simply imagining unskillfully. And the Monday he walks into is only Friday night's imagination wearing a coat. Now turn that same man toward the feeling of a man who has already received 7 million, not straining after it, not proving it, simply resting in it the way you rest in a fact you have always known. And something in the structure of his ordinary days begins quietly bending toward that feeling. Think for a moment of a woman standing in her kitchen on an unremarkable evening, the dishes still in the sink, the light going gray outside the window. She has spent years believing that her circumstances were the cause, and her feelings merely the effect. So she waits for the world to hand her a reason to feel abundant before she allows herself to feel abundant. And this is precisely the backward order Neville Goddard spent his whole life trying to correct. He taught that the feeling comes first, always first. The outer fact is only the shadow the feeling eventually casts. So instead of waiting, she closes her eyes right there among the unwashed dishes, and for a few unhurried minutes, she simply feels what it would feel like if the 7 million already sat quietly in her account. Not the fireworks of excitement, but the low, settled ease of someone for whom money is simply no longer a question, and nothing around her changes in that moment. The dishes are still there, the gray light is still there, and yet something within her has already moved house. She has taken up residence in a new state, and it is this state, not the dishes, not the gray light, that her whole life will slowly rearrange itself around. This is the workshop Neville Goddard spoke of. Unseen, unadvertised, running quietly beneath every ordinary evening you have ever lived through. So let this be the correction you carry from this very key. It is not the world that must change first, so that you may feel differently. It is your feeling that must change first, so that the world may follow. This costs you nothing but attention. Tonight, before anything else, give 3 unhurried minutes to imagining from the end, not the beginning. Feel the specific relief, feel the particular ease. Let it be real to you before it is real to anyone else. I am the imagination that fashions my 7 million. The second key is choosing one single assumption and refusing every other one. Neville Goddard taught that you must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that single assumption until it hardens into fact. And persistence here does not mean intensity. It does not mean gritting your teeth and forcing a feeling through sheer effort. It means fidelity, the quiet, repeated return to one chosen scene until it becomes more familiar to you than any doubt could ever be. Most people fail here not because imagination lacks power, but because they hold 10 different pictures in the same week. On Monday they assume wealth, on Tuesday they assume it will never come, on Wednesday they check the mail with dread. On Thursday they assume again, with a little less conviction than the week before. And the imagination, being perfectly obedient, being utterly faithful to whatever it is handed, simply gives back the confusion it was given. It is not that imagination refused them, it is that they never gave imagination one clear thing to build. Think of a woman pouring water into a mold on Monday, pouring it out and pouring a different shape on Tuesday, changing the mold again on Wednesday because a friend suggested something more sensible. She will never hold a finished form, because she never let anything set. Water takes the shape of whatever holds it, and so does consciousness. This is why Neville Goddard placed such enormous weight on the single assumption, one scene, one feeling, chosen deliberately in a quiet moment, and returned to nightly until it feels more natural than the old story ever did. Consider a man named Daniel, who wants his 7 million, and who, on the surface, seems to be doing everything right. He affirms it in the morning, he pictures it at lunch, but by evening he is describing his financial worries to his brother, in vivid, convincing detail, using every ounce of the same imaginative faculty to build a case for lack that he used that morning to build a case for abundance. Daniel is not one man with one wish. He is, without realizing it, 2 men fighting for the same house, and the imagination cannot serve 2 masters with equal devotion. This is not a punishment, it is simply structure. It is simply how a faithful power behaves when it is handed contradictory instructions in the same day. So this week, choose one specific scene of your 7 million already received. Let it be small enough to hold clearly. A phone call, a number glowing on a screen, a quiet, private certainty settling in your chest as you sit somewhere ordinary, and when the old thought comes, the worried one, the doubting one, do not fight it. Simply let it pass through you unclaimed, the way a stranger passes on the street without you turning to follow him home. It is not many wishes scattered wide. It is one single assumption held fast, watered daily, guarded nightly, until it is no longer something you are trying to believe, but simply the shape your whole life has quietly taken. I hold one assumption and I let it harden into fact. The third key is guarding the last thought before sleep, because that final drowsy moment carries more creative weight than an entire day of scattered wishing. Neville Goddard taught the state, akin to sleep, is the doorway state, drowsy, relaxed, the edges of the room softening, the critical faculty of the day finally quiet. And whatever feeling you carry across that threshold is impressed upon the deeper mind the way a seal is pressed into warm wax. This is precisely why the title of this teaching says what it says. You receive it, in a very real sense, before you ever wake up, because the assumption falls asleep with you and works upon you all through the night while your reasoning mind rests. Think for a moment about how differently the mind behaves in that last drowsy minute compared to how it behaves at noon. At noon, your reasoning stands guard at the door like a strict clerk, checking every thought against the evidence of the room around you. But in that soft moment, just before sleep, the clerk grows tired. His grip loosens, his eyes close, and whatever thought slips through in that unguarded moment walks right past him into the vault where fact is quietly decided. This is why Neville Goddard placed such enormous weight on this single nightly minute. It is not superstition. It is simply an honest observation of how consciousness is built. The door that stands locked all day swings open for a few soft minutes each night. Most people give this sacred moment to the worst material of the day. The argument replayed, the bill remembered, the fear rehearsed one final time before the light goes out, and they wonder why morning feels heavier than the evening before. Picture a man who spends his evening turning over news of a market falling, who carries a tight feeling in his chest all the way to bed, who lies down still arguing silently with a colleague from that afternoon, and who finally drifts off still gripping that worry like a stone in his fist. He has, without ever intending it, planted that very stone, and in the morning he is almost surprised to find the day arranging itself around exactly what he carried through the door the night before. This is not misfortune. Neville Goddard would say, this is simply the state akin to sleep doing precisely what it was always going to do, faithfully, obediently, with whatever was handed to it. Now picture instead a woman who, once lying down, body settling, breath slowing, deliberately turns her attention away from the day entirely. She does not review what went wrong. She does not rehearse tomorrow's difficulties. She simply lets her mind rest on one small, tender scene. Perhaps a phone call telling her the 7 million has cleared. Perhaps the quiet, satisfied breath of someone whose long striving is finally over. She does not think about this scene the way you think about a memory. She feels it, the specific ease settling in her shoulders, the warmth behind her closed eyes, a voice she loves saying congratulations, and this feeling, only this feeling, is what she allows to be the very last thing she is aware of as sleep closes gently over her. She has, without any strain of willpower, planted something entirely different than the man before her, and imagination, being perfectly faithful to whatever it is given, begins at once arranging the outer world around what she carried through that same quiet doorway. It is not the busy hours of daylight that build your fortune. It is the unguarded minute just before you disappear into sleep. And this is why Neville Goddard was so insistent that a man is undone far less by one hard day than by one carelessly guarded night. Tonight, when you lie down, let your very last act, before thought dissolves entirely, be this one deliberate feeling, not a sentence recited, not a phrase repeated by rote, but a felt scene, brief, warm, complete, held gently until sleep simply lifts it from your hands and carries it away to do its quiet work. I fall asleep tonight already living in the end. The fourth key is carrying the assumption through the ordinary hours of your waking day, not only through the night, because Neville Goddard taught that living in the end must become your natural manner of being, not a ritual performed once in the dark and then abandoned the moment the sun comes up. Most people treat the assumption like a candle they light only at bedtime. Beautiful for a moment, then forgotten the instant the alarm sounds, and they wonder why the daylight hours feel like a return to the old world. It is not that imagination stopped working. It is that they stopped feeding it. The sundial does not create the light. It simply stands still and lets the light mark the hours upon it. And this is your work now. To stand still in your assumption while the ordinary hours of the day pass across you, consider an ordinary Tuesday. You wake at 7, and in that first tender moment, you either remember your assumption, or you reach immediately for your phone and let the world hand you its opinion of your life before you have even had the chance to hand yourself your own. By 8, you are making coffee. And here is a quiet chance to feel, even for 10 seconds, like someone who already has 7 million. Does a person of that fortune rush the coffee? Does such a person grip the counter with worry over the small change in a jar? By noon, a bill arrives in the mail, and here is another chance to glance at it the way someone glances at a thing already handled, rather than a thing to be feared. By 3 in the afternoon, a friend mentions their own money troubles over lunch, and here is a chance to answer gently from the identity you have assumed rather than sliding back into old agreement out of politeness. By 6, you are driving home in traffic, and even this becomes a chance to sit inside the assumption rather than inside the frustration. By 9 at night, you have had perhaps a dozen such small chances. Unremarkable, easy to miss if you are not watching for them, and each one is a stitch sewn quietly into the fabric of your new state. None of them loud, none of them dramatic, and this is precisely why so many overlook them. They are waiting for one grand moment of proof when the real work was always hidden inside the small unnoticed minutes between the moments they thought mattered. This is what persistence actually looks like. It is not one dramatic act of faith performed once and then forgotten. It is 100 quiet returns to the assumption across one ordinary day. Coffee, the mail, the friend, the drive home, each one either strengthening the 7 million or quietly starving it. It is not a single leap, it is 1,000 small returns. We take a breath here. If this teaching is doing something in you, subscribe so tomorrow's word can find you the way this one did. It is a small door, but it stays open every day for you. The fifth key is the one that separates those who merely wish from those who actually receive, and it is the discipline of holding your assumption without defending it, without checking it, without arguing with the evidence of your senses. This is the key most people quietly abandon in the very week they most needed it, because it asks you to keep feeling rich while the account still looks the same, and nothing in us was ever trained for that kind of patience. First, consider that the outer world is always the last to move. It is the faithful servant, never the master. Neville Goddard taught that facts are the fruit of an assumption. They are never the root of one, which means the empty account you may be staring at today is only reporting yesterday's imagination. It is old news pretending to be current truth, dressed up in the authority of a bank statement. And the very moment you forget this and let that old news become your judge, you have quietly handed your creative power back to the very thing you were trying to change. Second, consider that the senses will always testify against a new assumption before that assumption has had time to ripen into visible fact. This is not a sign of failure. It is simply how growth works. A seed planted this morning does not show green by evening. And if you dug it up at noon to check on it, you would kill the very thing you planted. So it is with an assumption, the temptation to check, to ask, to prove, to explain yourself to a skeptical friend. All of it is digging up the seed before the root has taken hold. There is an old story of a man walking upon water toward a familiar figure, and for a moment he walks, held by nothing but a steady inward assumption, until he turns his attention to the wind and the waves around him, and the instant his attention leaves the assumption and lands upon the visible evidence, he begins to sink. Neville Goddard would have you read this not as a report of something that happened once on a distant sea, but as a picture of your own mind happening this very week. You are walking perfectly well upon your assumption of 7 million until you glance down at the wind, the unpaid bill, the unanswered email, the balance that has not yet moved, and the sinking you feel is not proof that the assumption failed. It is only proof that your attention left it. Third, consider what an ordinary Wednesday can look like for two different people holding the very same wish. The first checks her banking app the moment she wakes, feels the small cold drop in her stomach when the number has not changed, spends her lunch break rehearsing what she will say if the money never comes, and refreshes her email 3 more times before dinner. Each refresh a quiet vote against the very thing she claims to be assuming. The second wakes, feels for one unhurried moment the same warm certainty she fell asleep inside, and simply goes about her Wednesday. She answers her messages, she waters a plant, she laughs at something small, and when the bank app happens to cross her mind, she glances at it the way you glance at a clock. You already know the time on. Without wait, without interrogation, both women want the same 7 million. Only one of them is still building it, and the other has already stopped fighting for what she has decided is true. Fourth, consider that this same discipline extends gently into your evenings. Neville Goddard taught that where the day has handed you evidence that argues against your assumption, you need not defend yourself against it or explain it away. You may simply revise it in imagination before sleep, replaying the moment as it should have gone, letting the corrected version be the one that settles into you. This is not denial of what happened. It is refusal to let what happened be the final authority over what you are becoming. Fifth, consider the quiet difference between checking and noticing. A farmer notices the sky, notices the season, notices the ordinary signs of a field doing what fields do, but he does not dig beneath the soil every evening to interrogate the seed. And this is the distinction most people never learn. You may live your day fully, you may glance at your accounts, you may open your mail. None of this is the danger. The danger is the anxious grip behind the glance. The held breath, the silent question asking the world to please confirm that you are not foolish for believing. That grip is what starves the very thing you are trying to grow. So let your eyes move across the evidence of the day, the way a farmer's eyes move across his field, lightly, without demanding an answer before the season is ready to give one. Sixth, consider the woman who has assumed the wish fulfilled, but who checks her mail 3 times a day with a held breath. She has 1 foot in the assumption and 1 foot in the old world of lack, and a house built with 1 foot in each state cannot stand. Now picture her instead simply living, humming while she waters a plant, at ease at the market. Not because she is pretending, but because in her own private consciousness, the matter is already closed. That woman is not hoping for 7 million, she is remembering that she already has it, and the days simply have not caught up to announce what her own I am has already declared. It is not about proving your assumption to the world. It is about refusing to unprove it to yourself. You do not argue with the balance. You do not defend your certainty to a doubting voice. You do not even fight the wind. You simply decline to let it be the last word, and you return, gently, again and again, to the feeling of the wish already fulfilled, until the returning itself becomes the quietest habit you own. I hold my assumption gently, and I let the evidence catch up in its own time. The sixth key is keeping your assumption sacred by keeping it, largely, to yourself. Neville Goddard taught that the state you are assuming is delicate in its early hours, like a seed just beneath the soil, and every unbelieving word spoken over it, even a well-meaning one, presses down upon it like a heavy footstep on soft ground. This does not mean secrecy from suspicion, it means reverence. Think of how differently you would guard a candle flame walking through a windy doorway, compared to how carelessly you might carry a lamp already secured behind glass. Your new assumption of 7 million is, at first, a candle in a windy doorway, and the casual question of a skeptical friend, asked in genuine curiosity, "So how exactly is this going to happen?" can undo in one sentence what took you 3 quiet weeks to build. I think of a man who felt, for the first time in years, the quiet certainty of his wish fulfilled, and that same evening, Warm with the feeling, he told his brother everything. The number, the date, the reason he was certain, and his brother, meaning no harm at all, simply laughed and asked what he would do when it did not come. And something in the man went cold that night, not because his brother was cruel, but because he himself had handed the candle to the wind. He had needed a witness more than he needed the feeling, and so the feeling left him first. This is why Neville Goddard so often spoke of living from the wish fulfilled without needing to convince anyone else of it. You do not need witnesses, you need only your own steady feeling. And consider, too, the quieter version of this same mistake, the woman who tells no one aloud, but who cannot stop rehearsing her plans in her own head as though she were narrating them to an invisible jury. Explaining, justifying, defending a fortune that has not even finished forming, this too is a kind of exposure. The flame does not need to leave the room to be blown out. Sometimes the draft comes from your own restless explaining. So let the second guarding this key asks of you be gentler still, not only the unbelief of others but your own idle chatter about the wish. The urge to explain it, to rehearse it aloud, to prove it before it is due. Spend that energy inward instead. Let your excitement become warmth, held quietly in the chest, rather than noise sent out into a room. Pause for a moment, and pick one real person in your life you have been tempted to tell everything to, and simply decide, gently, that this one is not yet ready to hold what you are holding. This is not coldness toward them, it is warmth toward your own becoming. So this week, hold your 7 million the way you would hold a flame, close, sheltered, unspoken to those who would only blow on it out of habit, and let it burn quietly until it needs no defending because it has simply become fact. It is not a secret because you are ashamed. It is sacred because it is still becoming. I guard my assumption quietly until the world simply agrees with it. Here is the whole picture. Imagination is not fantasy. It is the workshop where your fortune is fashioned. One single assumption held fast is worth more than 10 wishes scattered wide. The last thought before sleep is a doorway, not a footnote. 100 small returns across an ordinary day are what persistence actually looks like. Refusing to defend your assumption against the senses is what lets it ripen into fact, and keeping it sheltered from careless words is what lets it finish becoming. None of these were ever 6 separate keys, they were 6 turns of the same single key. The recognition that you, the awareness reading this sentence, the I am behind every thought you have ever had, are already living in the end you seek, and every night you fall asleep, you are simply given another chance to remember it before you wake. If this teaching has stirred something you are ready to build daily, rather than visit occasionally. The 21-day reality shift was made for exactly this. 21 mornings and 21 nights walking you gently through the very practices we have named tonight. One single assumption held and deepened day by day, until living in the end is simply how you live. It is available now for $33, fully guaranteed. If it does not serve you, simply ask and receive your money back. The link is waiting in the description below. Say it once more with me in your heart. I am asleep tonight in the assumption of my wish fulfilled. I wake to find the 7 million already done. Imagination creates my reality. It is scary only because it is real. Sleep well tonight, and let tomorrow prove what you have quietly assumed.